CEO with only 1 month to live enters his restaurant in disguise, finds waitress crying. Truth freezes. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. In the heart of Manhattan, there was a high-end restaurant known for its exclusivity and exquisite service. Among the bustling city lights and the constant hum of luxury, one man, a powerful CEO, had secretly been battling an illness that was slowly taking his life. He had just 1 month left to live, and with every passing day, the weight of that knowledge pressed heavier on his shoulders. His empire, built over decades of ruthless work and dedication, now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the ticking clock of his own mortality. He had made his mark in the business world, but the reality of his situation was one he could no longer ignore. One evening, he made a bold decision. He would visit his restaurant, but not as the powerful CEO everyone knew. This time, he would enter in disguise, just another face in the crowd. He wanted to see what his life had truly been built on, to experience it as a regular person. Dressed in casual clothes, his face concealed beneath a baseball cap and sunglasses, he walked into the restaurant unnoticed. The soft glow of the chandeliers above, the clinking of silverware, and the faint murmur of conversations filled the air, just like any other night. He slipped into a corner booth, keeping his head low, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and regret. As he scanned the room, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. He'd built this place from the ground up, but now, it was just another part of the life he had left behind. His eyes moved across the room, finally settling on the young waitress, who was wiping down tables with a look of quiet exhaustion. She seemed familiar, but he couldn't place her immediately. As she walked past him, he noticed something strange. Her eyes were red, her face tear-streaked. The sight stopped him cold. Why was she crying? The last thing he expected to see in his own restaurant was a waitress in tears, a young woman who should have been full of life and energy. His curiosity piqued. The CEO's mind raced. He had so many questions, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't have the answers. Without thinking, he stood up and approached her, taking a deep breath as he prepared to speak. But as he did, the truth of the moment hit him harder than he ever anticipated. The moment the waitress saw him, she gasped and quickly turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. He had no idea what was really happening, but in that instant, he felt a connection, a deep and unsettling pull. Something told him this moment, this encounter, would change everything. What was she hiding? And what would he discover about himself in the process? Stay tuned to find out. I had no idea what was going on, but the moment the waitress saw me, she quickly wiped away the tears and turned her face to the side. She seemed startled, as if my presence had disrupted something more than just the atmosphere in the restaurant. I was standing there, uncertain of what to do next. The deep ache in my chest, knowing my time was running out, made the situation even more complicated. I had come to this place, my restaurant, to observe, to feel like a regular person for a while, but now I was caught up in a moment I couldn't ignore. I walked up to her, trying to look as inconspicuous as possible, but I knew my intentions were now far from ordinary. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice low, almost hesitant. She quickly wiped her eyes again, her expression softening as she turned back toward me. "I'm fine, sir," she said, her voice steady but carrying the faintest trace of sadness. But I could tell it wasn't the truth. I wasn't the kind of man to pry, not usually. But something about this moment felt different. There was something in her eyes that made me feel like I had to understand. "You don't have to pretend," I said, leaning closer. Her posture stiffened slightly, but she didn't turn away. For a brief moment, she seemed lost in her thoughts, as if she was deciding whether to speak at all. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke softly. "It's just personal stuff, nothing to worry about." I could sense that she was trying to push it away, to dismiss it, but her body language betrayed her. She was exhausted, not just physically from working, but emotionally as well. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a strange urge to know more. I had spent years building my empire, But in the end, all the wealth and success didn't matter as much as I thought it did. I was close to death, and yet, standing here, I realized there was so much I hadn't experienced, so much I had overlooked. You know, I said carefully, it's okay to have someone to talk to. Life's too short to carry everything alone. She looked at me then, a flicker of something in her gaze. You don't know me, she said, almost defensively. I don't need anyone's pity. It's not pity, I replied, trying to keep my voice gentle. I've been where you are. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. She hesitated again, clearly struggling with something she wasn't ready to share. But then, she took a step back, her eyes glancing around the restaurant before she spoke in a whisper. It's my mom. She's been sick for a while, and I just don't know how to handle it anymore. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the terms of my world. But here, in this restaurant, I realized I had never understood what it meant to truly struggle, to carry the kind of burden she was carrying. The thought made me feel small, powerless, and in that moment, I could see just how far removed I had become from the real world. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice low. But you don't have to face it alone. You have people around you who care, even if they don't always show it. For a moment, she stood still, her face unreadable. And then, without warning, she turned away, resuming her duties as if nothing had happened. But I could still feel the heaviness in the air, the unsaid words lingering between us. I watched her go, my mind racing with thoughts of my own past, of things I had buried for far too long. There was something about her that resonated with me deeply, something that felt like fate was pushing me in a direction I never expected. I didn't know what I was doing here anymore, or why I had come in disguise. But in that moment, it was clear that this was no longer just about observing my restaurant or my empire. It was about something much more personal. I had to find out more about her, about the story she had hidden behind her quiet strength. Maybe, just maybe, she was the key to understanding something that had eluded me all my life. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, my mind consumed with thoughts of the waitress and her story. By the time the night was over and I left the restaurant, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in a way I had never anticipated. I had only a month left, but I was no longer sure what I was meant to do with that time. Was it too late to make a difference? Or had fate brought me here for a reason? I spent the next few days consumed by the thoughts of the waitress and her troubled life. I had come to my restaurant in disguise to observe, to understand what the world looked like through the eyes of someone like me, someone who had lived a life of privilege and power. But in doing so, I had uncovered something far more complex than I had anticipated. Something that made me feel smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever imagined. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her tired eyes, her clenched jaw, as if she was fighting a battle that no one else could see. I had heard her words, her mother was sick. But there was more to it than that. There was a weight behind those words, a burden she was carrying alone. I couldn't just walk away from it. I had to know more. The next time I returned to the restaurant, I wasn't in disguise. I wasn't the CEO. I was just a man, desperate to understand. As I walked through the door, the familiar sounds of clinking glasses and quiet conversations filled the air. The restaurant was buzzing with energy, but I felt disconnected from it all. My eyes immediately found her, standing by the counter, talking to a colleague with a tired smile on her face. She looked as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders, yet she carried it with such grace. I walked over to her slowly, unsure of what I was about to say. My mind was racing, but the words didn't come. She looked up and met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was fear. Fear of being exposed, of having her struggles laid bare. "Hi," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I hope you're doing okay." She stiffened slightly, but didn't turn away. "I'm fine. Thank you," she replied, her voice professional but guarded. It was clear she didn't want to talk, but I couldn't leave it at that. "Listen," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I know things haven't been easy for you lately, and I just want you to know that you don't have to carry all of this alone." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. I could tell she was weighing whether to let her guard down or not. After a long silence, she spoke. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly, almost as if she were trying to convince herself. You don't know what I've been through. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. I may not know everything, I said, but I know what it's like to feel like the world's closing in on you, to feel like no one understands. And I just want you to know that it's okay to ask for help. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes softening slightly. But then, just as quickly, she shut down again, her expression hardening. I don't need anyone's help, she said firmly, and I don't want your pity. The words stung, but I knew she wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to the pain she was carrying inside. I didn't know how to reach her, but I knew I couldn't walk away. I'm not offering pity, I said, my voice steady. I'm offering a chance to share the burden. We don't have to go through this alone. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned away, walking briskly toward the kitchen. I stood there, feeling more helpless than I had in years. I had spent my life accumulating wealth, status, and power. But in this moment, none of it mattered. I couldn't fix her pain, no matter how many zeros were in my bank account. I couldn't fix what was broken in her life. As I left the restaurant that evening, the weight of the encounter stayed with me. I knew I couldn't force her to open up, but I also knew I couldn't just walk away. She was a part of something I had built, but more than that, she had become a reminder of all the things I had neglected in my own life. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this knowledge, but I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I would have to find a way to help her, even if she didn't want it. The next few days passed in a blur. I went about my usual business, meetings, and calls, but my mind kept returning to the waitress. Her quiet strength, her hidden pain, it haunted me. I started to look for ways I could help, ways I could make a difference without intruding into her life. But every time I thought I had a plan, I second-guessed myself. What if she resented my interference? What if I made things worse? But then, I remembered something. Life was too short for regrets. I couldn't waste the time I had left, not when I knew there was still so much I could do. So, I returned to the restaurant again. This time, I was determined to talk to her, to offer her something more than just empty words. I walked in, scanning the room, and there she was, standing by the counter. I could see the exhaustion on her face, the way she moved with the weight of the world on her shoulders. This time, when I approached her, I wasn't going to let fear or hesitation hold me back. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice more confident than before. She looked at me for a moment, her gaze flickering with something I couldn't quite read. But then, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's talk." I waited for a moment, watching as she took a deep breath and set down her cleaning rag. Her eyes shifted toward the kitchen, then back to me, the uncertainty still visible in her expression. "Okay," she said quietly. "You wanted to talk. Let's talk." Her voice wasn't harsh, but there was a clear wall around her. She wasn't sure what I was doing here, and neither was I. But the moment had arrived, and I couldn't turn back. "I'm not going to pretend I understand what you're going through," I began, sitting down across from her in a small booth by the window. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but didn't interrupt. "But I can see it. The way you've been carrying everything on your own. It's hard, I get it." She didn't respond right away, just stared at me, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "You don't know anything about my life," she said softly, her voice edged with a mix of defensiveness and vulnerability. "You don't know what I've been through, what I'm still dealing with." I nodded slowly, not denying the truth in her words. "You're right. I don't know, but I want to understand. I want to help if I can." She shook her head slightly, as if my offer was absurd. "Help? How could you possibly help me? You've got your own life, your own world. I'm just here, struggling every day, trying to keep my head above water." Her words came out in a rush, the frustration clear in her voice. "You don't know what it's like to be stuck in a place like this, to watch the people you love suffer, and feel like you can't do anything about it." Her gaze dropped to the table, and I could see her struggling to keep the tears at bay. I knew then that she was holding back so much more than just frustration. There was something deeper, something that had been eating away at her for a long time. I had to break through that wall. "Tell me about it," I said gently. "You don't have to carry it alone." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and surprise. "You really want to know?" I nodded, not sure where this conversation would lead, but needing to hear it nonetheless. "I've got a mom who's sick," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "She's been in and out of hospitals for the last 2 years, and nothing's working. The doctors don't know what to do. We've tried everything." She paused, wiping her eyes quickly, though I could see the tears she was trying to hold back. I'm doing everything I can to keep her comfortable, but it's getting harder. And the bills keep piling up. I'm working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, but it never feels like enough. She took a shaky breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I feel like I'm drowning, and no one knows. No one sees it. I sat quietly for a moment, letting her words sink in. I had been so focused on my own situation, my own impending death, that I had completely failed to understand what it meant to live with this kind of burden. The kind of burden that didn't show on the outside, that you could carry alone, but that slowly wore you down until there was nothing left. I can't imagine how hard that must be, I said, my voice low. But I want you to know something. You don't have to face this alone. She shook her head again, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I've been alone in this for so long. Why should I expect anyone to help now? The sadness in her voice hit me harder than I expected. I had thought I was the one with the biggest burden, the one facing the end. But in this moment, I realized how wrong I was. Her struggle was just beginning, and she had no idea how much longer it would last. Because sometimes, the people who care about you are the ones you don't expect, I said softly. And sometimes, it's okay to let others help carry the load. You don't have to do it all yourself. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, as if trying to decide whether she could trust my words. I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the exhaustion she had been hiding for so long. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered. I don't know if I can keep going like this. I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. This was more than just a chance meeting between 2 strangers. This was fate pushing me towards something I didn't fully understand yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just walk away. I had spent my life building an empire, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was this woman sitting in front of me, who had given me a glimpse of the real struggle of life. The kind of struggle that didn't show up in boardrooms or luxury offices, but in the quiet moments of exhaustion and pain. You don't have to keep going like this alone, I said again, my voice firmer now. I'll help you however I can. Whatever it takes. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes wide with disbelief. I could see the hope beginning to flicker behind the walls she had built around herself. But then, just as quickly, she closed herself off again. Why would you help me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, though it was more out of sadness than anything else. Because I've learned the hard way that nothing in life is worth having if you don't have someone to share it with. She looked at me for a long time before speaking again. I don't know if I can accept your help, she said, her voice small. But thank you. I nodded, understanding. You don't have to accept anything right now, I said. But just know that the offer is there. Whenever you're ready. The conversation hung in the air between us, a moment of silence that felt both heavy and hopeful at the same time. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew that, for the first time in a long time, I was finally on the right path. This wasn't just about my empire anymore. This was about people. About helping someone who needed it most, and maybe, in turn, finding my own redemption. As I stood up to leave, I looked back at her, but she was already busy with the next order. There was no more talking for now. But I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. I left the restaurant that night feeling like something inside me had shifted, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. The conversation with the waitress, her vulnerability, her struggle, it had all stirred something deep within me. For years, I had been focused on building my empire, chasing success, and making deals that would ensure my legacy. But now, in the face of a woman who had far more to fight for than I ever had, everything seemed trivial. The luxury cars, the expensive dinners, the deals that had once defined me, they didn't matter anymore. I thought I could just give her some words of encouragement and walk away. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just pity. It was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time, compassion. And perhaps, for the first time in my life, I wanted to make a real difference. I returned the next day, hoping to find her again. The restaurant was quieter than the night before, the lunch rush not yet in full swing. I approached the counter, scanning the room for her. When I spotted her, she was standing by the register, sorting through receipts. She didn't see me at first, but when I stepped forward, her eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. She looked tired, her face a little more worn than the night before, but there was something else too, something softer. I walked up to her, a little more confident this time, but still uncertain of what I was doing. "Hey," I said, my voice low. "How's your mom doing?" She paused, clearly surprised by the question, but then she sighed and shrugged. "Same as usual. We're just trying to get through the day." She looked at me for a moment, then added, "Thanks for asking. It's rare that anyone does." I nodded, trying to think of what to say next. I wasn't sure what I expected her to say, but I felt a deep need to help her in some way. "I've been thinking about what you said about your mom, and I just want to help," I said, my words coming out slowly, as if I was testing them. She looked at me, a small laugh escaping her lips. "You don't owe me anything," she replied, shaking her head. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," I said quietly. "I know you're carrying a lot on your own, and I don't want you to feel like you have to do it alone." She hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite understand. There was skepticism, but there was something else too. Something that made me believe she might be willing to accept help, even if she didn't know how to ask for it. "What are you offering, exactly?" she asked, her voice still guarded. "I don't know what I can do yet," I admitted. "But I know I want to make things easier for you. Whether it's helping with medical bills, or just taking some weight off your shoulders, I'm here." She shook her head slowly, as if trying to process what I was saying. "I don't know if I can accept that," she said softly. "It's just hard to believe someone would want to help like that. I'm not used to it." I could hear the sadness in her voice, the years of fighting and struggling alone, and I understood. People don't just accept help out of nowhere. Trust takes time. But I wasn't going anywhere. I was determined to make sure she didn't have to face this alone. "I get it," I said gently. "But you don't have to carry it all by yourself. Sometimes the hardest part is letting people in." She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the counter as if weighing my words. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken fear of what it would mean to accept help, to rely on someone else. It was something I knew all too well. I had spent most of my life depending only on myself, pushing people away, never allowing anyone to see the cracks in my own armor. But here, in front of this waitress, I realized how wrong I had been. There was strength in vulnerability, and there was no shame in asking for help. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I appreciate it. I don't know what will happen, but I'll think about it." I smiled, relieved to have gotten through to her, even just a little. "That's all I ask. No pressure." I stood up, about to leave, but then I hesitated. "One more thing," I said. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." She looked at me, her expression softening. "Thank you," she said quietly. Really, I left the restaurant that day feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a strange feeling, almost foreign to me. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered. As I walked down the street, I thought about her, about the life she was fighting for, and about the ways I could help her without overstepping. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her face it alone. I had only 1 month left to live, but I had found something in that time. A purpose, a reason to fight for something that was bigger than myself. And that was worth everything. I returned to the restaurant the next week, not expecting much, but still carrying the weight of the conversation we had just a few days earlier. I knew she had been hesitant, uncertain about whether to accept my offer or not, but I hoped something had shifted in her. The restaurant was quieter than usual when I entered, the soft clink of silverware and quiet chatter the only sounds breaking the stillness. My eyes quickly scanned the room, looking for her. There she was, standing by the counter, her back slightly hunched, her tired eyes fixed on the stack of orders she was sorting through. She didn't see me right away, and I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. The truth was, I was still struggling with the concept of offering help. I had spent so much of my life working alone, doing everything on my own, that offering help to someone else felt foreign, uncomfortable even. But I knew that what I was offering wasn't just about me helping her. It was about her allowing herself to be helped. And that was something I couldn't force. I walked over, my footsteps purposeful. She looked up when she heard me approach, and for a moment, there was that same mixture of wariness and sadness in her eyes. I could tell she was trying to gauge my intentions. "Hey," I said quietly, "how are you holding up?" She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "I'm getting by," she said, her voice tired. "But it's a lot, you know." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I understand," I said. "I just wanted to check in. See if you're okay. She looked at me for a moment, then sighed. I don't know if I'm ever really okay, she said. But I'm doing what I can. I've got a lot to juggle right now. She turned away, picking up a tray of drinks and carrying them to a nearby table. I followed her with my eyes, feeling a mix of empathy and helplessness. I had offered my support, but now I was beginning to realize that the hardest part wasn't offering it. It was waiting for her to accept it. The days that followed were a blur of work and thoughts of her, of the conversations we had shared, and the weight of the situation she was in. I wanted to be there for her, but I knew she had to be ready to let me in. That day, I decided to go back again, but this time, I wasn't going to ask. I was just going to be there. I didn't know how much longer I had left to live, but I knew I had enough time to make a difference, even if it was in small ways. As I entered the restaurant again, I saw her across the room. She was wiping down a table, her movements slow and deliberate. I couldn't help but notice how worn down she looked, the exhaustion that seemed to hang over her like a shadow. I walked over, but this time, I didn't ask about her mom or her situation. Instead, I simply said, I've been thinking about what you said last time. You don't have to carry all of this on your own, you know. She looked at me, her face unreadable. You don't know what it's like, she said quietly. I'm trying to keep everything together, but it's hard. It's exhausting. I get that, I said, my voice softer now. I've spent my life trying to keep everything together too, but sometimes, letting go is the hardest thing. Sometimes, asking for help is the only thing that keeps you from breaking. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face as if trying to determine whether I truly understood. I don't know if I can ask for help, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've always had to handle things on my own. That's the thing, I said, taking a step closer. You don't have to do it alone. Letting people help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. She didn't say anything right away, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. The fear of trusting, of letting someone else in, of being vulnerable. But I could also see something else, something that was beginning to shift, just a little. I can't promise things will get better overnight, I said gently. But I can promise that you don't have to face it alone. And I'm here for you, whether you need someone to talk to or just someone to listen. She stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on me. And then, slowly, she nodded. I don't know what this means, but thank you. The words were quiet, almost hesitant, but they were enough. I could see the walls she had built around herself start to crack, just a little. And for the first time, I felt like I was actually making a difference. Not in the grand way I had imagined, but in a small, meaningful way. In a way that mattered. I left the restaurant that night with a quiet sense of hope, unsure of what the future held, but knowing that I had done something important. I had offered her a way out of the darkness, even if she wasn't ready to take it yet. But I would be there, ready when she was. And maybe, just maybe, I had found a reason to keep fighting until the very end. I came back to the restaurant a few days later, determined to keep my promise. It had been a week since that conversation, and while I had noticed a subtle shift in the waitress, she seemed a little less guarded, a little more open. It wasn't enough. I knew that to truly help her, I had to find a way to break through the walls she had built around herself, walls built over years of pain and struggle. As I walked in, I saw her immediately. She was at the counter, busy with the lunch rush, her hands moving quickly but with a certain tiredness. She was still carrying that weight, but I could see the quiet strength behind her actions. There was something different in the way she held herself now, something that suggested she was beginning to believe that she didn't have to carry it all alone. But I could also tell that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy for her. It wasn't something that could be fixed in a single conversation or even with one act of kindness. It would take time. As I approached her, she looked up and gave me a brief, almost hesitant smile. Hey, I said, my voice steady. How's it going today? She sighed but didn't hesitate to respond this time. Same old, she replied with a small shrug. Busy, but manageable. I nodded, taking a seat at the counter, watching her for a moment. I've been thinking about you, I said quietly, my tone softer this time. She looked at me, and for a moment, I could see the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the same professional mask she had worn when I first met her. You don't have to keep asking, she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. I'm fine. I could feel the walls going back up, the distance growing again. But I wasn't ready to back down. I know you're doing your best, I said, meeting her gaze. But I can see how hard you're working, and I can see that it's taking a toll on you. You don't have to pretend everything is fine. I'm not here to judge. I just want to help, if you'll let me. She paused, her hand stilling for a moment as she wiped down the counter. Her eyes were fixed on the rag in her hand, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself back. You don't know what it's like, she said, almost to herself. I don't have anyone else. It's just me, trying to hold everything together. I know what it's like, I said quietly. To feel like you're holding the world on your shoulders, with no one to help you. But I also know that it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to do this alone. She looked up at me, her expression softening slightly. I don't know how to accept help, she admitted. I've been on my own for so long. Asking for help feels like weakness. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. I could see how much pain she was carrying, how deeply ingrained her fear of relying on others was. It was a fear I knew well, a fear that I had lived with for most of my life. But I also knew that it was a fear that could be overcome. It's not weakness, I said, my voice firm but gentle. It takes strength to admit when you need help. It takes courage to let someone in. And you don't have to do this alone, not anymore. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped down the counter. I could tell she was struggling with something inside her, trying to decide whether to let herself be vulnerable, whether to trust me. I don't know if I'm ready, she said softly. But I appreciate what you're offering. I just don't know how to take it. That's okay, I said, my voice steady. You don't have to decide right now. Just know that I'm here for you, whenever you're ready. She nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was the first time I had seen her smile like that, a genuine smile, not the one she gave customers out of habit, but one that hinted at something deeper. Thank you, she whispered. It was all she said, but it was enough. I could see the crack in the wall she had built, just a small one, but it was a start. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that this moment, this conversation, was a turning point. I had come here hoping to offer help, but in the process, I had learned something about myself as well. I had spent so much of my life trying to control everything, trying to fix problems without asking for help. But now, I realized that sometimes, the best thing you can do is let go. Let others in. Offer support without expecting anything in return. As I left the restaurant that day, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. There was still a long way to go for both of us, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the right path. I didn't know how much time I had left, but I knew that whatever it was, I was going to make it count. I arrived at the restaurant a few days later, my thoughts still lingering on the quiet conversation I had shared with the waitress. There was something different about her that night, something that had shifted. In her, even if it was barely perceptible, her walls were still there, but there was a small crack in them, and that crack, however small, gave me hope. As I walked through the door, I saw her behind the counter, her usual position. But today, there was something about her that was different. The way she moved, the way she held herself, it wasn't just exhaustion anymore. There was something more to it, something that hinted at a kind of quiet resilience. I walked up to the counter, and she looked up from her work, her gaze briefly meeting mine. She gave me a small, almost hesitant smile, and for a moment, I could see the slightest hint of warmth in her eyes. It was the first time I had seen her smile since that conversation, and it made me feel, for the first time in a long while, like maybe I was actually making a difference. Hey, I said, my voice gentle. How's everything going today? She paused, her hands stilling for a moment, as if she was taking a breath before answering. It's been all right, she said, her voice a little softer than usual. Still a lot to do, but I'm managing. I smiled, seeing the small but real shift in her. I'm glad to hear that, I said. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about. You don't have to keep it all to yourself. She looked at me, a little surprised, and then looked away, focusing on her work. I know, she said quietly. I know it's just hard to let go sometimes. I could see that the walls she had built up were still there, but they were no longer as thick. She was starting to let herself believe that maybe it was okay to ask for help, that maybe she didn't have to do everything alone. And that, I realized, was the first step. It's not easy, I said, my voice steady. But it's worth it. Letting someone in, even just a little bit, it can make a world of difference. She was silent for a moment, then met my gaze again, her eyes a little more open, a little less guarded. I'm starting to believe that, she said softly. But it's still hard. I don't know if I'm ready to fully let go, you know? I nodded, understanding. That's okay, I said. You don't have to do everything all at once. You take it one step at a time. She nodded, and for the first time, I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I'll try, she said quietly. And that was all I needed to hear. That was enough to tell me that, even though the road ahead was still uncertain, there was progress being made. The next few days were a blur of small moments, of checking in on her when I could, of offering quiet support in ways that didn't intrude but still showed I cared. I could see her changing, little by little. She was starting to open up more, starting to share a little more about herself, about the things she was going through. But there was still so much she wasn't saying, so much she was holding on to. I knew she wasn't ready to share everything, and I wasn't going to push her. But I also knew that, in time, she would. We were both learning to trust in each other, learning that there was no shame in asking for help. There was no shame in letting someone in. As I walked out of the restaurant that evening, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. I had spent my life building an empire, but in that moment, I realized that the connection I was building with her, was more important than anything I had ever achieved in business. I wasn't sure what the future held for either of us, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to walk away from this. I wasn't going to give up on her, and I wasn't going to give up on myself either. For the first time, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. It wasn't about money, or power, or legacy. It was about people. About helping them when they needed it most, and being there for them even when they didn't know how to ask for help. And maybe, just maybe, in helping her, I was also helping myself. It was a strange thought, but a comforting one. As I drove home that night, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a feeling I had long forgotten, a feeling I had almost given up on. But now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find it again. I returned to the restaurant the following week, determined to keep moving forward. The days had passed in a blur of work and worry, but something inside me had shifted. The conversation with the waitress had been a turning point, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. She had been so closed off, so unwilling to let anyone in. Yet somehow, our exchange had planted a seed of change. The walls were still there, but they weren't as impenetrable as before. I wanted to be there for her, but I knew she wasn't ready to fully open up. It was going to take time. As I walked into the restaurant, the familiar hum of conversation and clinking dishes greeted me. The staff was busy preparing for the evening rush, and the atmosphere was lively, just as it had been the last time I was here. I glanced around the room, searching for her, and there she was, standing at the counter, her eyes scanning the room as she quickly scribbled something on a notepad. She didn't see me at first, and I took a moment to observe her. She looked exhausted, as if the weight of the world was still pressing down on her. But there was something different about her now. A small shift, something in the way she carried herself that told me she was starting to believe, even if just a little, that she didn't have to go through this alone. I approached the counter slowly, not wanting to startle her. When she looked up and saw me, her face softened for a brief moment, and I could see the familiar flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Hey," I said, my voice calm. "How's it going today?" She gave me a small smile, but I could tell it was still a bit forced. "It's been busy," she replied, her voice neutral. "Same as usual." "I get it," I said. "You're holding it together, but it's not easy." She nodded, the smile fading as she looked down at the counter, her hands busy with the notepad in front of her. "It's just a lot," she said quietly. "A lot to handle on my own." "You don't have to do it alone," I said, my voice steady, but gentle. "I'm here, whenever you need me. I mean it." She met my gaze, her eyes searching mine, as if she was trying to decide whether to believe me or not. I could see the conflict in her, the desire to let someone in, but also the fear of being vulnerable, of letting her guard down. "You've already done more than anyone else," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You just need to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me again, her expression softening. "I don't know if I can fully accept that," she admitted. "It's hard to trust people, especially after everything that's happened." I nodded, understanding. "I get that. Trust takes time." But you don't have to have it all figured out right now. I'm here, and I'm not asking for anything in return." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes filled with emotions she hadn't spoken aloud. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe, just maybe, I'll take you up on that," she said quietly, almost as if the words surprised her. I smiled, relieved, but didn't say anything more. I knew that this was the start of something, but I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. She had a lot to work through, a lot to heal, and I was ready to be there for her every step of the way. "You don't have to do it alone," I repeated. "You've got people who care about you, even if it doesn't always feel like it." "I'm starting to believe that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a weight to her words, a quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew that this was the right path. It wasn't about grand gestures or fixing everything in one go. It was about showing up, being there, and letting her know that she wasn't alone. I left the restaurant that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from business deals or numbers on a screen. It was the kind of hope that came from human connection, from the possibility that things could change, even if just a little. I wasn't sure what the next steps were, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to keep showing up. This wasn't just about offering help. It was about giving her the space and support she needed to find her own strength, to rebuild her trust in herself and in others. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew it was worth it. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, we were both finding our way towards something better. I returned to the restaurant the following week with a sense of anticipation. Things had shifted, both for me and for her. I had spent days reflecting on the conversations we had shared, wondering if what I had offered her was enough, or if there was something more I could do. Every visit, every small interaction had led to small steps forward, but I knew it wasn't going to be a quick fix. Life wasn't like that. You couldn't fix the pain of years with just a few kind words. Still, there was something about her, something about the way she had started to open up, that made me believe we were both on the right path. When I entered the restaurant, the usual noise of clinking dishes and low conversations filled the air. It was a busy evening, but there was a sense of calm in the way the staff moved about their tasks. I spotted her immediately, standing by the counter, her back to me. Her body language was different. She seemed more at ease, though still with a hint of exhaustion in her posture. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was real. I walked over to the counter, and she turned at the sound of my footsteps. Her expression softened when she saw me, a small, genuine smile spreading across her face. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "How's it going today?" She paused, then nodded. "Better than usual," she said, her tone quieter, but there was a sense of calm in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Still busy, but I'm getting by." "That's good," I said, giving her a reassuring smile. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last time, about not feeling ready to ask for help. I just wanted to remind you that it's okay." She looked down for a moment, then met my gaze again. "I know," she said, a little quieter this time. "I've been thinking about it too. I don't know why it's so hard to let someone in. I guess I've just always had to do everything on my own." "You don't have to anymore," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to carry it all by yourself. You don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to let others help, to lean on people." She nodded slowly, but her eyes were distant. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I've been doing it this way for so long that I don't know any other way." "It's going to take time," I said softly. "But it's worth it. Trust me, letting go of the burden doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." She looked at me for a moment, then sighed. "I wish I could believe that," she said. "I've seen so many people come and go in my life, and I've always been the one left to pick up the pieces. I guess I'm just scared." "Scared of what?" I asked, my voice low. "Scared of being disappointed again? Scared of needing someone and having them walk away?" She nodded, her gaze dropping to the counter. "Exactly. I don't know if I can handle that again. I've already lost so much." The vulnerability in her words hit me harder than I expected. I had known she was carrying a heavy load, but hearing her express it so openly made me realize just how deep her fear ran. "You don't have to do this alone," I said again. "And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not asking for anything from you. All I'm offering is support, and I'm not going to back down." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine as if trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. You don't have to believe me all at once, I added. Just take it one step at a time. Let me prove that I'm here for you, that I won't walk away. She seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding slightly. I don't know if I can accept everything you're offering, but I'll try, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, relieved to hear those words. It wasn't a yes, not yet, but it was a start, a beginning. It was the first real crack in the wall she had built, and it made me believe that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to trust me. That's all I'm asking for, I said. Just try, and when you're ready, I'll be here. She nodded, her expression softening a little. I'll try, she repeated. Thank you. I left the restaurant that night feeling a strange sense of calm, a sense of accomplishment that didn't come from any business deal or achievement, but from something more personal, more meaningful. It was about building trust, step by step, and offering something real, something that wasn't tied to expectations. I knew there would be more challenges ahead. I knew that opening up would be difficult for her. But I also knew that the hardest part was already behind us. The hardest part was her beginning to believe that she didn't have to do it all by herself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was making a real difference in someone's life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that, no matter what happened, I was here for her. And that made all the difference. I walked into the restaurant the following week with a sense of anticipation, though I couldn't exactly explain why. The past few days had been full of subtle changes, small shifts I noticed in her, but changes nonetheless. She had opened up a little more each time we spoke, letting the walls she had carefully constructed come down, just a little. She was still guarded, still not entirely trusting, but there was hope in her actions. The way she smiled when she saw me now, though faint, was different. It was as if she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this fight. As I entered the restaurant, the usual hustle and bustle of the lunchtime rush greeted me. The waitstaff moved quickly, and the air was filled with the hum of conversations and clinking dishes. I spotted her across the room, her movements slightly slower than the others, but with a kind of focused determination. She was still here, still working hard, still carrying the weight of it all. But this time, there was something different about her, a quiet strength. I made my way over to the counter, where she was wiping down the surface, her eyes focused on the task at hand. When she saw me approach, she looked up, her eyes meeting mine for just a moment before she quickly glanced away. Hey, I said gently, not wanting to startle her. How's everything today? She gave me a small smile, but it was different from before. It was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. It's been a bit easier today, she said quietly, though I could still hear the fatigue in her voice. Not as much going on. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. That's good to hear, I said. How's your mom? She paused, her shoulders tensing for just a moment. I could tell that, even after everything we had discussed, she still wasn't ready to fully open up. She's hanging in there, she said after a beat, her voice soft. It's just hard, you know? I can only imagine, I said, my voice gentle. But I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. I'm still here, whenever you need me. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was trust. Either way, it made me believe that the small steps we had taken so far had been worth it. I don't know if I'm ready, she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the counter. But I'll try. I'll try to let people in. My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. That's all I'm asking for, I said. Just take it one step at a time. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. She nodded slowly, her fingers curling around the cloth in her hands. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time she had said those words, and it felt like a small victory. It was a moment I knew we both needed, a moment that marked a change, not just in her, but in me as well. For the first time, I realized that offering help wasn't about fixing everything at once. It wasn't about sweeping in and solving all the problems. It was about being there, about showing someone that they didn't have to carry their burdens alone. I left the restaurant that day with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't know where things would go from here, but I knew that this was the beginning of something important. It wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about me either. It was about what we could become, together. In the days that followed, I made a point to check in on her, just small moments to let her know I was still there, that I hadn't forgotten. I saw her slowly start to let down her guard more and more, to let herself trust, just a little. She would ask for help when she needed it, and I would be there, quietly offering it. It wasn't always perfect. There were still moments of hesitation, moments where she would pull back, but those moments were becoming fewer. I could see the way she was beginning to change, not just in how she interacted with me, but in how she carried herself. She was starting to believe that maybe she wasn't meant to carry the world on her shoulders alone. It wasn't a grand transformation. It wasn't an overnight change. But it was real. I could feel it, and so could she. As I walked into the restaurant one evening, I could sense the difference in her before I even saw her. She wasn't just the waitress anymore. She was someone who was beginning to reclaim her life, to rebuild what she had lost. She was starting to live for herself, not just for everyone else around her. And as I watched her, I realized that the same was happening for me. I had come into this restaurant looking for something, maybe redemption, maybe purpose, but I had found something unexpected, a chance to truly help someone, to make a difference in ways I had never thought possible. And in doing so, I was helping myself. This wasn't just about the last month of my life. It was about the legacy I wanted to leave. And for the first time, I knew I was leaving something meaningful. I entered the restaurant a few days later with a feeling of anticipation that had become familiar over the past few weeks. There was a shift in the air now, something that felt different, like change was on the horizon, but I didn't know what form it would take. She had come so far already, but I could sense there was more. She had started to let me in, and with that, the journey had taken on new meaning. As I walked in, I saw her immediately. She was standing behind the counter, focused on her task, but this time, there was an unmistakable ease in her movements. The way she held herself was different, more confident, more grounded. She still had the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she was no longer carrying it alone. It was a subtle change, but a profound one. I walked over, my steps purposeful. She glanced up when she saw me approaching, her face lighting up with a small smile that made my heart lift. "Hey," I said, my voice soft. "How's everything today?" She looked at me for a moment, and for the first time, her eyes didn't just flicker with exhaustion. There was a glimmer of something else. Hope, maybe, or a quiet sense of peace. "It's been a better day," she said, her voice steady. "Not as much chaos." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, my tone sincere. "You deserve a break, you know?" She nodded slowly, her expression softening, but then she hesitated, her gaze turning downward. "I'm still figuring things out," she admitted. "But it's getting easier to breathe." "That's all you can do," I said gently. "One step at a time." She met my eyes again, and there was something different in her gaze this time. Something that made me believe she was starting to see her own worth. "I didn't think I could do it," she said, her voice small. "I didn't think I could keep going." "But you did," I said, my words firm. "You've made it this far. And that's something to be proud of." She smiled again, more genuinely this time, and it was the most beautiful thing I had seen in weeks. "I'm still scared," she said, her voice quieter now. "I don't know if I can fully let go, or if it's all just going to fall apart again." "It's okay to be scared," I said softly. "But letting go doesn't mean giving up. It just means allowing yourself to have the space to breathe, to be human." She nodded, though her eyes were still clouded with uncertainty. "I don't know how to trust again," she admitted, almost to herself. "After everything that's happened, I've had to build these walls around me just to survive. I don't know how to let them down." I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Trust isn't something that happens overnight. It's something you build, step by step. And it starts with allowing yourself to believe that you deserve support, that you don't have to face everything alone. She didn't respond right away, her hands busy with the task at hand, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I could see the conflict there, the hesitation, but also the desire to believe that things could be different. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to carry the weight of the world alone. "I think I'm starting to believe that," she said after a long pause. "Maybe I don't have to do this all by myself." I smiled, feeling a quiet joy in my chest. "You don't. And I'm here, for as long as you need me." She looked at me again, her expression softer than it had been before. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." I felt my heart swell with a mixture of pride and relief. I had come here to offer her support, to show her that she wasn't alone. But what I hadn't expected was that, in doing so, I had begun to heal something within myself as well. You don't have to thank me, I said gently. We're both figuring this out. Together. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. I could see it in the way she carried herself, in the way she was beginning to trust, just a little. The walls weren't down entirely, but they were weaker now, and I knew that with time, they would continue to crumble. She was starting to believe in the possibility of something better, and that, I realized, was the first real step toward healing. I didn't know what the future held for either of us, but I was beginning to understand that sometimes, the most meaningful journeys aren't the ones that lead to grand accomplishments or achievements. They're the ones that bring you closer to people, that show you the importance of connection and trust. And with that thought, I left the restaurant that night, my heart full. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I was hopeful for what was to come. I walked into the restaurant one last time, my heart feeling a strange mix of peace and uncertainty. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, of change, and of learning. Not just for her, but for me too. I had come here searching for answers, looking for a way to make sense of my life, of the time I had left. And in doing so, I had found something far more profound than I expected: connection. It wasn't about fixing everything, or even making everything better. It was about being present, offering support, and showing someone that they weren't alone in their struggles. I had watched her grow, little by little, over the course of our interactions. She had started to trust again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders alone. I could see the difference in her now, the way she held herself with a quiet strength that had been absent when I first met her. She wasn't perfect, and she wasn't healed, but she was stronger than she had been. And that, in itself, was enough. As I entered the restaurant, I saw her immediately. She was standing by the counter, looking over the menu for the evening shift, but this time there was no exhaustion in her posture, no weariness in her eyes. There was still a hint of vulnerability, but it wasn't the same. She was no longer hiding it, no longer trying to mask it. She was letting herself be human, and that was the most powerful thing of all. I walked over to the counter, and she looked up when she saw me, her face breaking into a soft smile. It wasn't just a smile for the customers anymore. This was real. "Hey," I said, my voice steady but full of warmth. "How's everything today?" She paused for a moment, and then nodded, her eyes bright. "Better than before," she said. "A lot better, actually." There was a sense of calm in her voice now, something I hadn't heard before. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "You've come a long way." She shrugged, but there was no uncertainty in her now. "I guess I have," she said. "It's not easy, but I'm learning to take it one day at a time." "That's all you can do," I said, my voice soft. "And you're doing it. You're doing it well." She looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time, there was no doubt in her eyes. No fear of what might happen, no anxiety about the future. She was here, in this moment, and she was strong. "I never thought I'd get to this point," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I could trust anyone again, or let anyone help me. But you showed me that it's possible." I smiled, my heart swelling. "I'm just glad I could be here for you. But you did the hard work. You let yourself take that first step." She nodded slowly. "It wasn't easy, but it's worth it. I'm not sure what comes next, but for the first time, I feel like I can face it." The weight in my chest lifted entirely as I looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. She wasn't just the waitress anymore. She wasn't just the person who had been carrying all the burdens of her life alone. She was someone who had chosen to change, to let go of the fear and embrace the possibility of help. And that was enough. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. "You've come so far." She smiled again, a real smile this time, the kind that reached her eyes and made her glow. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." I stood there for a moment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Not just for her, but for the journey we had both taken. It wasn't just about me helping her, or her letting me in. It was about the way we had both found a sense of purpose, of connection, of trust. We had both learned that it was okay to lean on others, to let ourselves be vulnerable, and to accept help. I turned to leave, but before I did, she called after me. "You know," she said, her voice carrying a hint of laughter, "I think I'll be okay. I think I finally believe it." I looked back at her, smiling. I know you will. And I'll always be here if you need me. As I walked out of the restaurant that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I had come here to help her, to make a difference, but in the end, she had helped me just as much. In a way, she had given me the chance to find redemption, to live the last months of my life in a way that mattered. It wasn't about what I could leave behind in terms of wealth or success. It was about the people whose lives I had touched, whose paths I had crossed, and whose hearts I had helped to heal. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized that, even though my time was running out, I had finally found something worth living for. And that was enough. In this heartwarming journey, we dive into the life of a man who discovers that true fulfillment comes not from wealth or power, but from connection and kindness. In these touching stories, a man nearing the end of his life offers his help to a waitress who has been carrying a heavy burden alone. As their paths intertwine, both are transformed by the realization that reaching out and offering support can change lives in unexpected ways. The touching stories unfold as the waitress begins to trust, allowing her vulnerabilities to be seen, and the man finds redemption by making a difference in someone else's life. These moments of growth and healing show how even the smallest acts of kindness can lead to profound change. Touching stories like these remind us that no one should have to face their struggles alone. As their connection deepens, they both learn the power of support, compassion, and the importance of letting others in. In these touching stories, the journey toward healing is slow but meaningful, proving that we all need someone to lean on at times. Their story is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is hope to be found when we choose to share our lives with others. Touching stories such as this one teach us that it is never too late to change, to open our hearts, and to make a lasting impact on the world around us. The message is clear. These touching stories show us the beauty of human connection and the profound effect we can have on each other's lives.